Hi, this is Ed in San Diego, and our very special guest today on Global Business News TV is Chris Kline, who's in the Tampa area. Welcome, Chris Kline. It's been a long time.
Hey Ed, glad to be on.
Yeah, well, welcome. Uh, as I said yesterday or the day before when we were communicating about doing this show, um, I started the TV talk show series using Zoom in March of 2020 when COVID struck and wiped out my live meeting business, and I had to figure out what to do. So I started learning how to be a TV talk show host. And since then, more than 1,000 productions have been published, and all of them are on the YouTube channel. And it's gotten a lot of eyeballs for sure. So one thing I've decided to do this year is to go wide, go deep, and go far as I can with this product of getting people from the industry as well as other industries to use this platform, this TV talk show, as a PR device to talk about what will benefit you, what will benefit your business, what will benefit your customers because of your business. And if you like what we do and the experience is pleasant, then we always would welcome you to buy an ad or be a sponsor and do more. But more on that later. You are under no obligation to do anything more. I'm very happy to provide this complimentary to you to help promote your new book, Unpacking Employee Relocation. You can see it on the left side of that Amazon screen. I see it's got a really ridiculous price if people want to buy that thing right now. And today is what is today's date? May 8th. And it goes on sale on May 12th. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is a pre-order price for the ebook.
Okay, great. All right. So your subhead is Unpacking Employee Relocation. Take control of your mobility program, reduce costs, and retain top talent. Boy, that's nirvana when all that happens. What about the idea of companies doing more to provide total care to the employee and company and family? In other words, providing psychological safety on that assignment, particularly if it's international. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so a little bit about just my background. I've actually relocated 14 times myself. So
Oh my, that's
yeah,
that's
I
amazing.
yeah, I relocated for the military. I relocated as, a newlywed, as a new parent, as kids with middle school, kids in high school, kids in college, and now the empty nester move as well. But most of those relocations were for my career. They were for a new job, a new opportunity, a new city to kind of grow professionally. But the whole thing was a psychological trip. I mean, what a lot of people don't realize when it comes to relocation is, the amount of sacrifices that an employee and their families are actually making to take that new position in that new city, and what is entailed in a relocation. So part of what I try to spell out in the book is, there's a lot of ways that you can support an employee. They're not all financial. There's a lot of ways to help them through this process of going through a relocation. Because again, I've gone on some really great trips, some great locations, and also some not so good ones. And there were certainly challenges in every one of those relocations.
Okay, good. Now, how long did it take you to write this book? In other words, certainly you've been thinking about it a long time. You have so much experience and insight as to what does go wrong and what could be better that you probably thought of writing a book years ago. But from the time you actually started to put words on paper or on the screen um, to coming up now, how long a period was that?
So the actual writing process, I had made the decision last summer that I was going to write a book. I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this. And I shared it with my wife. And the first comment she made was, Chris, you've never written a book before. What makes you think you can write a book? And I said, well, I think I can actually tackle this in a very particular way, a very determined way. And I've been in sales for 4 decades now. And I've prided myself as a salesperson of being a teacher first, helping the customer truly understand what are the dynamics and what they're looking at, what are the different options, what are the features, and then of course trying to learn very diligently what is it that they wanted to accomplish and what were their goals, what were their problems, and type of thing. So I took a very methodical approach of almost a teaching approach. So if you look at this book, this book might be 400 or 500 presentations that I've done throughout my career, whether it's on a tax protected home sale program or lump sum with support services or tax gross up. These are all things that I've communicated in one form or another. So when I decided to write the book, I said, I'm going to write the book. And she said, well, great. How long do you think it's going to take you? And I said, well, I'm going to start the day after Christmas and I'm going to be done by January 1st of this past year. And I missed that. I actually didn't finish it until January 2nd.
So I read that your background includes being an engineer.
Correct.
So you know how to organize thoughts and you know
Right.
how to execute sequentially.
Correct. And again, this is where, and you and I talked briefly about the creative process of writing a book and whether I had a ghostwriter and what that looked like. And I went the route of really doing more of using an editor to kind of help me refresh and organize the book. So the original manuscript was just under 180 pages. The final product is 299 pages. And what she helped me do is she said, hey, these are great stories. These are great ways to help a reader understand what is you're communicating, but why don't we change the order around a little bit? Why don't we take it from a perspective of somebody actually going through a relocation, the steps of going with a relocation? And then there were also suggestions made of, hey, why don't you go back and why don't you add a checklist, or why don't you add some more reference materials? I had a lot of case studies, which is you're going to find a lot of case studies in the book. So we definitely built around that. But again, the initial process of writing it between Christmas and New Year was the manuscript. It took 3.5 months then to come up with the final product because the amount of rewrites that you then have to go through to get the book finished.
So some late nights at the computer, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So did it change your opinion?
You know what? It didn't change my opinion. What it did is there's two models in our industry for the most part. And for the last 20 years, there have been two models for relocation. You either do it yourself, or meaning the corporation manages it in-house, or they outsource it to a relocation management company. And those are the two accepted practices of managing relocation. And when I was writing the book, I wanted to talk about how to work within the confines of those two models. And again, that was the idea. What I discovered going through the model or through the book was really this third idea, this third concept, which is known as co-sourcing. I talk about co-sourcing within the book. And that is a third option that is not the mainstream right now. Again, for even today, for the most part, companies are using one of those two other options. And I'm looking to change that because I honestly believe that more of a co-sourcing model is better for the client. It's less expensive for the client, which means that there's more financial resources to provide to a relocating employee and their trailing, kicking, scratching family along the way, right? And again, it just gives them more money and more control. Which again, the essence of the book is this is how you get more control of your mobility program as a corporate buyer.
To what extent did you bring in tech, mobile apps, that kind of thing?
Text is weaved in throughout the book, and again, there's an idea out there, a panacea that tech's going to fix everything. Well, there's a tremendous amount of tech today on the internet about how to move and finding a home and where to maybe find a school. That doesn't mean it's any good, and it doesn't mean that that enhances the experience. And what I try to demonstrate through the book is use tech along with the other resources. I mean, tech's not the end all, the fix all for everything. It definitely can help automate. It can help ease processes. It can make things much simpler. And as an example, I used one example of a tech is, it used to be if you wanted competitive moving prices, you have your employee go out there and get three or four estimates and then just go at the lowest price, right? Well, that means you have 3 or 4 movers that have to come out. It also means that you have 3 of the 4 moving companies that lose in that model. They spend the money, they go out, they don't win the deal. They're going to get fatigued from that along the way. But now there's technology out there where the employee downloads an app, they complete their survey, you load that survey up into your application, you send it out to as many movers that want to see it, and they quote on that actual estimate. So now those movers are able to look at that job, and they're moving out of beautiful San Diego, I see in your background, and they're moving to Atlanta, and they have a truck empty, and they need to fill that truck out. Great, I've got an unbelievable price, and I'm going to deliver a wonderful service. Conversely, you've got another mover that says, you know what, I don't service Southern California, so I'm going to price this in a way that I don't really want the order. So that's an example of how technology makes it better for the suppliers, makes it better for the company, and ultimately for the employee, because they can get the dates and the services that they want for a reasonable price.
Boy, it sounds like it's probably, I don't know of any other relocation industry leader has written a book.
I found a couple. Because I looked, 'cause I didn't want to just write another book, right? And that somebody's already done. And I found that there was one on a policy design out of Europe, that's out there. There's another one that was written around kind of the destination services approach, written by another company founder over a decade and a half ago. But nobody's ever written a book like this. And what I mean by that is I love the quote by Mark Twain. Everybody sits around and talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it, right? Well, everybody sits around and talks about relocation, but nobody does anything about it. So that's where I, kind of had a lot of conversations with different people in our industry, and they said, "Hey, I'm thinking about writing this book. What do you think?" And I got a lot of yeah, thumbs up, do it.
So, Chris, I have to play TV talk show host here rather than an industry insider. I've been on the fringe and involved for a very long time, but not ever really marketing or delivering a relocation service. I just know a lot of people who do. And so I've learned that way. And I've sort of stuck to my knitting here as being in PR and marketing and advertising, finding a way around. So what this TV talk show host has helped me, and I'm sure Ben is finding out the same thing, is that it gives you agency. Gives me agency to invite people like you and others from across borders and cultures, from across time and space to meet here digitally with no cost involved at all to talk about their brands and themselves and then communicate that service. To what extent will the stuff that we're doing right now, impact tomorrow's relocation industry?
If you mentioned sales and marketing, if you were to talk to most corporate clients out there and you were to say, give me a single word, give me a word that describes what needs to get fixed or solved or addressed, and the word you're going to hear most often is transparency. And what I hope to do with this book is to move away from a very, very opaque business model for everyone. And again, this is not just the corporations that are the buyers, but the moving companies that have this very complicated methodology of determining their pricing, or the RMCs and how they price with referral fees and commissions and markups and fees and temporary living and how it works. And what I believe that our industry is in desperate need of is a fee-based model. And that is, look, you want me to do these services, these policies for you as a corporation, you want to outsource, here's the fee. It's $9.95, it's $6.95. And by the way, all of the supplier agreements, the contract, the pricing, that flows through to you as the client. And then what happens is the RMCs are going to compete on, hey, how best can we get the services available to our clients? And since we're actually passing them through with no markup, no commissions, no referral fees, and just charging a flat fee, the client can now have complete transparency into what they're paying, and then also transparency in how those suppliers are being selected.
So I don't want to touch third rails, if you will, but why do companies, well, let me ask you a question and then we'll get into the answer. Do companies tell people, tell employees, don't take your furniture with you?
Yes, and they should. And I'll give you an example. I was when I was an engineer, I worked for Northern Telecom, which became Nortel, which is now not around anymore. And I had to make the horrible sacrifice of going to Hawaii on a 16-month assignment. And they moved my two cars, my wife's car, my car. They moved all of our furniture for us to go in a studio apartment. They spent more on that household good move than we could have spent renting a furniture apartment for the 16 months. So that was, that was a long time ago. In today's world, and again, this is where a lump sum program actually does have a viable application is, hey, we're going to give you 15 grand for this. Do you want to go and move your stuff? Go ahead. Or do you want us to go rent a place? You can use the money however you want to, and we'll help you with the destination service provider to help you find that apartment. So yeah, absolutely. To ship only because shipping is so expensive today, outrageously expensive.
And it may get bombed.
Yeah.
Oh no, it depends if they go through the Red Sea or not. But so let me also ask you about the psychological safety again,
Mhm.
providing coaching, assignment coaching, never mind getting along with your spouse and the kids. And because what happens, especially on a move, you become the outsider. The employee
Mhm.
becomes an outsider. And that creates tension in the house.
Right.
Never mind a feeling of getting upset, of not having any close friends. People probably think, well, I've got enough close friends and I don't trust enough
Right.
to divulge things. And so what happens is that you get to be a loner, and that creates all kinds of issues. And I don't know if companies are dealing with that. They certainly are now because people, particularly women, are demanding attention.
Well, I think that, the remote work experiment and again, I'm not on the show to
Right.
advocate or dispute remote work, but I think that one of the things that we've learned from remote work is you're isolating your employees. They're no longer part of the team. We can say they are by video calls and that kind of stuff, but I've lived in both worlds, and I can tell you there's nothing as isolating as remote work. And now you compound that as you're going to move that person to a different city now, a different country. They don't understand the culture, the customs. I remember when our first reload, my wife and I were very young, and we moved to San Diego. We had just gotten married. We moved from Atlanta, Georgia. You want to talk about a culture shock going
Yeah.
from Atlanta, Georgia to Sandy, and we actually moved to San Diego. And this was 1985. So you think about how different Atlanta was in 1985 compared to San Diego.
Well, I moved from Boston to LA in 1980, all
Okay.
right, with a wife and a teenage daughter. Uh,
Shock. Yeah.
I was moving my business. I was publishing California Bound Relocation Guide, which is a spinoff of a Boston guide that I created and then sold. But took the idea and went to LA. Century 21 was my biggest supporter in Boston, and they set me up with the leaders of Century 21 in LA.
Hmm.
I got off the plane with a red carpet, with, sort of. Uh, but the Michelle, 13-year-old, entering Beverly Hills High School, and the wife at the time, no longer the wife, but at the time, um, it was a disaster, an emotional disaster. And it drove us crazy. The business was a resounding success, so that it glossed over. We were able to live well, but uh, we knew nobody, and nobody really wanted to know us. And so it was really strange. And so I that's how I understand a relocation, because I actually did it, and I don't recommend it. But I understand there's a need, and if companies spend the extra money and take care of the people, they'll have a lifetime friend, if not employee.
I talk a lot in the book about an employer's brand, right? And again, companies spend billions of dollars on their branding every year. And let's face it, a lot of large corporations that we support spend billions of dollars on branding every year. And they don't think of relocation as part of their brand. But in many
Uh,
cases, these individuals are candidates first. They were recruited to the company, and relocation is part of it. So you've got this courting period where you're trying to bring the employee and their family on board. Then you bring them on board and you relocate them at the same time. So they're not only just dealing with a new position and a career move, new company, they're dealing with a new community. And to me, and that's the other thing is the easiest thing that people think you can do is just throw more money at the problem. And that's not going to fix the problem. You can throw more money at a person, but if you don't give them the right support, you don't have the right support mechanisms within your organization, within the suppliers that you pick, within the suppliers that they pick,
Yeah,
money's not going to matter. It's still going to be a horrible experience.
right. And there's animosity that develops and might never be fixed.
You know, a trend that I started to see at the end of 2024, the last 6 months, is I was involved in two requests for proposals. And as companies that do this well, they'll have discovery meetings before the RFP goes out. And meet and greet, let's talk about your company, let's talk about our company. And two companies actually had transferees in those discovery meetings. So the
Smart.
meeting actually they didn't talk about their goals and objectives as a corporation. They had these employees talk about what was your experience like? What were your challenges? What would you change? And it was extremely insightful. And it's one of the on Ben's show, Ben asked a question. If you were talking to a C-level, the chief people officer right now, what would you say? And I said, go talk to your employees who have recently relocated and not the ones on the same floor as you, because they would have had a great experience because they're C-level and they probably would have had the resources from the company. Go talk to somebody that came in as an engineer. Go talk to somebody that's in the accounting department and ask them what the experience was like to relocate and listen to them. It'll be insightful.
Especially if they would agree to recording it.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, probably not, though. Anyway, I've really enjoyed this few minutes with you. Tell us about Orion.
So Orion is when I was looking at this neck, I made a career change last July, company change. And I was looking at what do I want to do? I want to stay in the space. I really love what I'm doing. Do I want to start another company? Do I want to set up another version? And I actually looked at, okay, if I did, what would it look like? How would it be based? And then I started talking to some investors about, okay, what would we do to restructure and to set up this company again? And I had a business plan that was all around setting up a bunch of back office processes like accounting, payroll, expense management, tax, and it was overwhelming. It would require a significant expense. And then one of my friends within the industry, Bob Rosing with DwellWorks, I had reached out to him and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this, Bob. What do you think?" He goes, "Hey, you don't have to build all this stuff. There's people out there that can help you support this." So they introduced me to Orion. And I had a chance to get to know them, and I was evaluating them as a business partner, meaning that they were going to be a supplier partner for the expense processing and the tax and that type of stuff. And I got to see the model a little bit better. And at the same time, I'm thinking about the book, and this is all going on at the same time. And then as I'm writing the book, and this concept of co-sourcing is, a lot of companies will outsource because they don't want to handle expense payments to employees or supplier invoicing or funding of that capital that's required for the expense management. And I got to look at them. I said, "Wow, this is the key. This is the missing ingredient." Because what they do for their corporations, they support a lot of RMCs and a lot of companies that are in the space, and they're essentially the back office. But they also work directly with corporations who say, "I want to engage with an RMC for these items, but I don't want to give up the control of how the money is being processed." That's where Orion comes into play. So, got to know the people there, the management team there really well, the owners real well, and love the product. So essentially, it's expense management on a global basis. So they handle reimbursements to employees, they'll handle audit, they'll handle uh, the tracking of the expenses. So if it's a managed cap, if it's a budget, whatever it is, and then they handle all the tax gross up calculations. So again, they can determine, hey, this is a taxable receipt. It has to be grossed up. Here's the gross up methodology to do that, and then they do all the reporting along with that, and then they built an application to support all that.
So do you have a team under you, or you're sort of like a one-man band, but using all their resources?
One man band. I work directly for them. I'm responsible. I'm transformation and growth leader is my position with them right now.
Very interesting. Thank you for your time. And the name of the book again?
Unpacking Employee Relocation, and it will actually be out on May the 12th, and I'll be releasing it in time for FEM in Dallas, where I'll be attending, and I'll also have some copies of the books.
Will you be speaking about your experience?
Not in the actual sessions, but I do have some roundtables scheduled while I'm there.
Very good. I wish you well, and it's great to connect with you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
All right, this is Ed signing off in San Diego, and that's Chris Kline. And the name of the book, one more time.
Unpacking Employee Relocation.
That's great. Thank you. Please come back. This is Ed, and we're going to sign off. Bye-bye.